The desert was the kind of quiet that made a man feel small. The stars stretched wide and unblinking, scattered like a million sparks across a black velvet sky. The wind whispered low through the dry brush, carrying the scent of dust and distance. It was the kind of night where every sound echoed in a man's chest, making him remember things he'd rather forget. Cole Maddox tugged his duster tighter around his shoulders as his horse, Dusty, clopped steadily along the ridge. He had been riding since sundown, heading nowhere in particular, just away. Away from the town that had buried his past in gun smoke and silence. Away from the faces that no longer looked him in the eye. A bounty hunter by trade, Cole had long learned that the desert could be both a refuge and a reckoning. And tonight he wasn't sure which one it was. The moon hung low and swollen, throwing long silver shadows over the sand. Somewhere out there, a coyote called, a lonely, aching sound that stirred something in Cole's chest. He almost didn't see her at first. A small pale shape on the horizon, half buried in the sand. At first he thought it was just a trick of the light, another ghost of the desert playing games with his tired mind. But then the shape moved. He kicked Dusty's sides gently, urging the horse closer. As he neared, he saw it was a woman, young, her white dress torn and stained, her long hair tangled with sand and grit. She was sitting on her knees, shivering, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. When she lifted her head, her eyes caught the moonlight, wide, wild, and full of fear. "Ma'am?" Cole said softly, reining in his horse. "You all right?" She flinched at the sound of his voice, stumbling backward in the sand. "Stay back," she cried, her voice cracking, hoarse with thirst and terror. Cole raised his hands slowly, palms open. "Easy now," he said. "Ain't here to hurt you." Her lips trembled, and for a moment she looked like she might run, but there was nowhere to run to. Only miles of empty desert stretching into the dark. Her body swayed weak before she collapsed forward. Cole was off his horse in an instant, catching her before she hit the ground. Her skin was ice cold despite the lingering heat of the sand. She was shaking violently, mumbling something he couldn't make out. He laid her gently against the saddlebag and reached for his canteen, tipping it to her lips. She drank greedily, coughing, tears streaking down her dust-covered cheeks. "Slow down," he murmured. "You drink too fast, it'll make you sick." Her breathing steadied a little and her eyes fluttered open again. Who are you?" "Name's Cole," he said. "Cole Maddox, just a rider passing through." She swallowed hard. I was taken. They left me here." Cole frowned. "Taken?" She nodded weakly, tears glinting in the moonlight. "A stagecoach. They stopped us, bandits. They took the money, the horses. They killed the driver. And when I tried to run, they dragged me into the desert and left me." Her voice cracked, breaking into sobs that tore through the stillness of the night. Cole's jaw tightened. The desert was cruel, but men could be crueler. He reached into his pack, pulling out his blanket and wrapping it around her trembling shoulders. "You're safe now," he said quietly. "Ain't nobody gonna hurt you anymore." She looked up at him, her eyes wide and searching. "You don't even know me." He met her gaze. "Don't have to. You're out here alone in the cold. That's enough for me." The wind howled low again, kicking up a veil of sand that shimmered in the moonlight. Cole helped her to her feet, steadying her against his arm. She leaned into him, weak and shaking, as he guided her toward the small campfire he'd built earlier near the rocks. He got the fire going again, the flames flickering to life and painting her face in warm gold light. For a long while neither of them spoke. She sat wrapped in his blanket, staring into the fire, her lips moving in silent thought. Cole watched her. The way the firelight danced across her features, delicate yet hardened by fear. Finally she whispered, "My name's Clara." He nodded. "Clara, that's a pretty name." She gave a small, tired smile. "Thank you." "Cole, right?" "That's right." They sat in silence again, listening to the fire crackle and the night breathe around them. The desert could make two strangers feel like the last souls on earth. After a while, Clara spoke again, her voice soft. "Why are you out here?" Cole looked into the fire, the flames reflected in his eyes, flickering like the ghosts of old regrets. "Let's just say I was looking for a way to disappear." "From what?" He hesitated, then said, "Myself, mostly." She didn't press him, and he was grateful for that. Some truths were better left buried like bones beneath the sand. The night grew colder. Clara's shivering hadn't stopped, and Cole could see the exhaustion written in her every movement. He shrugged off his duster and laid it over her shoulders. She started to protest, but he shook his head. "Keep it. I got enough leather on me to stay warm." She smiled faintly, the corners of her mouth trembling. "You don't have to be kind to me." He looked at her then, his voice steady. "Ain't about having to be. It's about what's right." Something in the way he said it made her eyes soften. She looked down at the ground, drawing her knees up beneath the blanket. "I thought I was going to die out there," she whispered. "When they left me, I could hear the coyotes. I thought that was it, that nobody would ever find me." Cole leaned forward, his gaze firm. "Well, they were wrong. You were meant to make it through the night. You hear me? You made it this far, and as long as I'm breathing, you ain't alone." For a long moment, Clara just stared at him, as if trying to decide whether to believe him. Then slowly she nodded. The fire crackled softly between them. Above, the stars seemed closer than ever, like they were leaning in to listen. As the hours passed, Clara drifted into an uneasy sleep. Cole sat awake, keeping watch, his hand resting on the grip of his revolver. Every sound in the dark made his muscles tense, the cry of a nighthawk, the whisper of shifting sand, but his eyes kept drifting back to the girl sleeping beside the fire, the fragile rise and fall of her breath. There was something about her, something that stirred. The part of him he'd buried long ago. A part that still believed in saving, in protecting, in something more than just surviving. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the desert in soft gold and rose. Cole stood, stretching the stiffness from his limbs. He turned to see Clara waking, blinking against the light. "Morning," he said quietly. She smiled, faint but real. "Morning." He handed her the last of his coffee, and she drank gratefully. "We'll head east," he said. "Nearest town's about half a day's ride if we push steady." "You'll be safe there." She hesitated. "And you? Where will you go?" He adjusted his hat, glancing toward the endless stretch of sand. "Guess I'll figure that out when I get there." As they mounted up and began their journey, the desert stretched before them, vast, endless, and full of promise. The kind of place where anything could happen. Clara looked back once at the fire's dying embers, then at the man who'd found her when no one else would. And as the sun climbed higher, Cole couldn't help but glance at her, too, wondering why fate had chosen him to find her that night, and what it meant for the both of them. Whatever it was, he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't riding alone anymore. The desert sun rose, like a burning coin over the horizon, and the light hit the sand with a fierce glare that made the air shimmer. By the time Cole and Clara had ridden for an hour, the chill of the night had vanished, replaced by a dry, relentless heat. The land stretched out forever, a sea of golden rust where even the wind sounded tired. Clara held tightly to the saddle, her arms wrapped around Cole's waist as Dusty carried them steadily east. Her strength was slowly returning, but every so often, he could feel her tremble against his back. He didn't say anything about it. Some things didn't need words, just time and patience. By noon, they found a small creek cutting through a patch of mesquite and scrub. Cole dismounted, tied the horse, and helped Clara down. She sank to her knees beside the water, splashing her face and drinking in slow, careful sips. Cole watched her quietly, the way the sunlight caught in her hair. It reminded him that even in a place so barren, beauty could still survive. "You were right," she said softly, cupping water in her hands. "About not being alone. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't found me." Cole crouched nearby, filling the canteen. "Wouldn't think about it too much," he said. "World's got enough ghosts already." Clara smiled faintly. "You talk like a man who's seen plenty." He looked at her, eyes steady under the brim of his hat. "I've seen enough to know the desert don't forgive easy." She hesitated. "Then why did you come back for me?" "Didn't come back," he said after a moment. "Never left. Just happened to be where I needed to be." She gave a small laugh, her first real one since the night he'd found her. It caught him off guard, a sound soft as wind chimes in the dry air. They rested for a while, letting Dusty drink and graze. Cole kept scanning the horizon, his instincts sharp as ever. Years of bounty hunting had taught him to listen to the silence between the sounds, and there was something in that silence now, something watching. When they started moving again, Clara noticed it too. "You keep looking back," she said quietly. "Is someone following us?" He didn't answer right away. He could see dust rising far behind them, a thin line against the bright sky. Could have been riders. Could have been nothing. But in the desert, nothing had a habit of turning into trouble. Maybe, he said finally. We'll keep moving. By mid-afternoon, they reached the edge of an old mining town, half buried in sand, the wood rotting and sun-bleached. A crooked sign still swung in the wind. Its paint faded to ghostly letters, Red Hollow. Cole dismounted and scanned the empty street. We'll stop here for a bit, he said. Get out of the sun! Inside what had once been a saloon, the air was thick with dust. Clara sat on an overturned crate while Cole searched the shelves for anything useful. He found a few cans of beans, some old matches, and a cracked mirror that caught the light like a blade. When he turned, Clara was staring at the mirror's reflection, at herself. The dirt, the torn dress, the haunted look in her eyes. I hardly recognize me, she said softly. Cole set the mirror down. You've been through hell. That don't change who you are. She looked up at him, her eyes dark and searching. You sound sure of that. I am. Before either of them could say more, Dusty whinnied outside, nervous. Cole froze. Then he heard it, the faint creak of leather, the distant jingle of spurs. Someone was coming. He moved fast, pulling Clara behind the bar and motioning for silence. Through a crack in the saloon wall, he saw 3 riders coming down the street, dust trailing behind them. They weren't lawmen. The way they rode, slow, easy, like they owned the place, told him exactly what kind of men they were. Bandits. Clara's breath hitched. It's them, she whispered. The men who left me. Cole's jaw tightened. He peeked again. 3 of them, all armed, their faces rough and sunburned. One of them, tall with a scar cutting down his cheek, spat into the dust. You sure she's dead? One of the others asked. She's buzzard meat by now, the scarred man growled. But if not, we'll finish it. Cole's hand went to his revolver. Clara caught his wrist, eyes wide with fear. Don't, she mouthed. He shook his head slowly. They won't stop. Not till one of us does. She swallowed hard but didn't argue. When the men dismounted and started toward the saloon, Cole was already moving. He slid behind the door, waited for the hinges to creak, and then, bang, the first shot echoed through the empty town like thunder. The lead bandit fell hard, dust exploding around him. The others dove for cover, shouting curses. Cole, please, Clara gasped. But it was too late. The quiet stranger she'd met in the desert was gone, replaced by the deadly calm of a man who'd lived by the gun too long. Cole moved like a shadow, every shot measured, every motion clean. When it was over, silence fell again, heavy, final. The bandits lay still in the dust. Clara stared at him, trembling. He holstered his gun slowly, his face unreadable. You all right? She nodded weakly, tears welling. I am now. Cole stepped outside, checking the horizon. The sun was dipping lower again, painting the town in blood-red light. He found a canteen on one of the bodies, tossed it aside, and looked back at Clara. You don't have to be afraid anymore, he said softly. She stood, her hands still shaking. How do you do it? Stay so calm. He looked out at the fading sun. You learn to. When you've had to bury more friends than you can count, fear don't stick around long. She walked closer, her voice trembling. And what about you, Cole? Who do you have left? He hesitated, then looked at her. Right now. Just you. For a long moment they stood there. 2 souls who'd been lost in the desert, now bound by something neither could name. The wind carried the scent of gunpowder and sage. Above them, the first stars began to appear again. When they finally left Red Hollow, the world felt different. Quieter. The kind of quiet that came after a storm. Clara rode beside him now, no longer behind. She held herself taller, the fear in her eyes replaced by something else, something stronger. As night fell, they made camp near a line of old mesquite trees. The fire crackled softly, and for the first time, Clara looked truly at peace. Cole handed her a cup of coffee, and she smiled. Thank you, she said. For everything. He shrugged lightly. Didn't do it for thanks. Then why? He met her gaze, his voice low and steady. Because nobody deserves to be left alone in the dark. She stared at him for a long moment, then said quietly, You won't be either. Not anymore. The words hung between them, fragile and real. Later, as the night deepened, Clara leaned against him by the fire, the warmth of his arm steady beneath her head. The stars above shimmered like they had the night he'd found her. But now, they seemed closer somehow, as if the whole desert was holding its breath. Cole looked down at her, at the peace on her face, and felt something stir inside him. A promise, not spoken but written in the silence between heartbeats. He reached for her hand,